Good morning. So here we are on a Tuesday. I hope you have a nice weekend, and we're going to do Emancipation Proclamation. We're going to be on pages 254 to 255, and let's go through our people first. Hopefully you can see me because, again, I don't have a cameraman. So if I fall over or go off screen or whatever, that's why. All right, so this is Abraham Lincoln. He is the President of the Union. Remember, the Union is the original United States, and the Confederate States seceded from the Union, okay? And that's what created the Civil War. So, here is his first general, Winfield Scott, okay? He came up with the Aconda Plan, which did not go well, not because of the plan was bad. It was a good plan. It's just that nobody thought the war would go on that long, so they didn't actually use his plan until a couple years into the war. Then they did actually use it to squeeze the South. His next general was McClellan. Even though McClellan had plans and he knew what Lee was going to do, he just couldn't remember, he just couldn't execute that, even though he knew everything he was going to do. So Lincoln fired McClellan and then got Ambrose Burnside, who was a very good strategist. It's just that the logistics didn't work out very well, so he was unable to get the bridges in time, okay? Then we have William Tecumseh Sherman, and he is going to help out his good buddy Ulysses S. Grant in the South and cut the South off from the North, which we'll talk about at another time, okay? Here are our Confederates, and this is Jefferson Davis. Again, he is the president of the Confederate States of America. And here we have Thomas Stonewall Jackson, okay? And here's Jeb Stuart, James Longstreet, and Robert E. Lee. All right, so today we are going to look at 1862, 1863, some of the events that happened there. We've gone through the Battle of Antietam. We've gone through first and second battles of Bull Run. We've gone through Shiloh. So when the war first began, the whole goal of Lincoln was to continue to keep the Union together. That was his whole reason for going to war. It wasn't to free slaves. It wasn't to do anything but keep the Union together. But very quickly, remember the war started in 1861, April of 1861. But 1862, he had a lot of people like pressuring him, saying, hey, you need to free the slaves. Remember we talked about the abolitionists, and the abolitionists wanted to free the slaves right away. And we remember we talked about how that wasn't the greatest thing because they didn't know how to read, they didn't know how to write, they didn't know how to do anything but the planting. Even if they did free them all, where were they going to go? Who were they going to work for? So the abolitionists were still in force at this time in history, and they're still talking to President Lincoln and saying, hey, you need to free the slaves. Now, Lincoln had a couple problems. One, the Union Army kept losing the wars, yes? And two, his advisors felt that he needed to win a war in order to do the proclamation. The Emancipation Proclamation. Another thing is, remember we have 4 states that have slaves that stayed with the Union. They did not secede. So if Lincoln signs, I'm freeing all the slaves, he was worried that those 4 states would then say, hey, we're out of here, and go with the Confederacy. So do you remember those states? Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, and Delaware. Okay? So he was worried about them leaving. So he's kind of like in this dilemma. He's got people saying, you gotta free the slaves. And then he's got people saying, wait, what are you doing? And then he's got his own things, which are, hey, I don't want to alienate those 4 states because I really need them. He needed them for many reasons. Remember we talked about he needed them because of the rivers that ran through those states. Those were very important supply lines. And without the rivers, he was going to be in trouble moving his supplies to the Union Army in the South where he needed them to be. So he did not want them to leave. Okay, those 4 states were super important to his effort of keeping the Union together. Again, he didn't go into this war to free slaves. He went into this war to preserve the Union, which means to keep it together. Okay, so what happens is after all this pressure, and he needs a win. Remember, they called Antietam a win because Lee's army left. Not because they actually won anything, because they had more casualties. It was not really great for the Union. The only reason they called it a victory was because Lee's army retreated so that they could regroup and come back and fight another day. So on the heels of that, which government runs very slowly, in 1863, he signed the Emancipation Proclamation. Big fancy words. Emancipate means to free. Okay, so this is just freedom. Emancipation is freedom. Proclamation is to say, hey, I'm doing this. Hello, listen to me. It's like an announcement. Okay, today we're closing school because of coronavirus. That's a proclamation. So the Emancipation Proclamation is just really fancy words to say a freedom announcement. Okay? So he signed it in 1863, and he made some provisions in it. So it actually only affected the slaves that were in the Confederate States. So if you were in Kentucky or Missouri, Maryland, or Delaware, you got to keep your slaves. Okay? But if you were in any of the states that seceded, like South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Texas, those states got to, their slaves were supposed to be freed. Now, I'm not really sure how that worked out. Actually, I do know. It didn't work out very well because those states said, you don't have any authority over us anyway. You can make all the proclamations that you want to. We don't need to listen to them because we are now a separate country. We are calling ourselves the Confederate States of America. Okay? In saying this only affected the southern states that seceded, it kept slavery in the border states, so the border states did not get upset. They were like, yeah, those guys left. That's okay. We're good. Another effect that it had was that Europe changed sides. I know, this is very interesting. So all along, Europe was supporting the South because of the cotton. But Europe, by this time in history, had outlawed slavery in their country. Basically, in this time of history, the United States is the only state that still has slavery legalized. So Europe's kind of not been real happy about that, about us still having slaves, but they wanted the cotton. So as soon as Abraham Lincoln signs the Emancipation Proclamation, Europe changes and says, hey, we are going to support you in this war. Okay? So that's a big change. Another big change because of the Emancipation Proclamation was that slaves could fight. They could fight in the Union. Okay? This allowed them to leave those southern states that the Union was fighting in, join the Union Army because they were no longer considered slaves or property of their slave owner. So it did have some effects, but probably not the ones that we're really thinking about. Another thing was that any slave that chose to leave and fight in the Union, after the war was over, they could not take the slaves back. At least that's how it read. Now, I am sure that if the southern states, if the Confederacy had won the war, they would have gone and grabbed their slaves back. I'm sure that would have happened. But in this case, it did not because, as you know, the Union is going to win in the end. Okay? So this is the Emancipation Proclamation. So what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and read page 254 to 255. Okay? And let me check the book for the worksheet because I'm kind of changing things again. So the worksheet that you'll do is 129 to 130. Okay? Because that's actually the whole lesson for today. Can you believe it? All right. So actually, I'm not correct in that. It was only half a lesson because I'm breaking it up. So see, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. So don't do the worksheets at all. Just read those pages, and we'll come back tomorrow, and we're going to talk about the soldiers who were slaves and how they fought in the Union War, and how actually they weren't like really accepted, and they had their own regiments and stuff. So we'll talk about that. So don't do any worksheets. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Don't do any worksheets. What I would like you to do instead is I would like you to answer this question. Name one thing you learned about the Emancipation Proclamation today. If you need to rewind it and watch it again, that's fine. But that's what I want you to turn in. I want you to just write out, you can type it, and just tell me, what did you learn? All right? And I will see you on Thursday. Bye.